Hello, my name is Jim. This is my podcast, The Bloody Vegans. You're very welcome to it. Each week, I'll be travelling ever deeper into the world of veganism, discovering along the way a multitude of viewpoints from the political and ethical to the practical. I'll be doing this through a series of conversations, each aiming to further illuminate my understanding and hopefully yours of all things plant-centric. And this week is no different. In this week's episode, I'll be speaking with Jill Ettinger, the editor-in-chief of the world's leading web-based vegan magazine, LIVEKINDLY. I'm sure you've all heard of LIVEKINDLY. If you haven't, you definitely should check it out. It is a fantastic resource for all things vegan, all kinds of breaking news in the vegan community. And Jill is a pivotal force within that organisation. She's a journalist of some repute, an incredible writer, and has done so much in the kind of vegan community, whether it be in kind of the food supply chain, activism, and more latterly journalism. Well, I suppose actually there's been a thread of journalism throughout her career. So without further ado, here's a conversation between me and Jill Ettinger of LIVEKINDLY.
Is kind of interesting. I mean, I didn't really kind of become aware of the term vegan and what it meant until I was late middle school or high school, and was a big fan of the Smiths. And
Yep.
I stumbled on their seminal album Meat is Murder. But I have a long history of not liking animal products. I kind of joke that I fully came out of the refrigerator as a vegan when I was in my teens, but as a child, I couldn't stand eggs. I couldn't stand meat, or, what kid doesn't like cheese? I didn't like cheese. I was kind of iffy on ice cream, loved popsicles, iffy on the ice cream. And so I think there was just a long history of not liking animal products and not really knowing why, or maybe knowing why on some intuitive level that had never really been articulated. I mean, I have memories of like chicken drumsticks on my plate and seeing the vein and the bone and being grossed out by that. And always loved spending time with animals. We were like season pass holders to the zoo in my town and would go quite often. And I was just, more than anyone in my family, I have 3 siblings. I was pretty... I didn't want to leave. I was just pretty attached to all the animals there every visit. So I think there was some kind of just understanding that I couldn't articulate till I was in my teens.
And when you sort of eventually kind of discovered the Smiths and went on that bit of a journey and sort of like, as you say, kind of came out of the refrigerator, if you like, what was there kind of anyone that was there with you? Was it friends, family, anyone kind of guiding you along that path?
Well, I'm about 150 years old now. So back then, no. In middle school, a best friend and I went vegetarian. I think that was the best way we could kind of wrap our heads around it. We gave it a go for a couple weeks, and it was really difficult. There weren't a lot of options back then, and I lived in Western Pennsylvania, so it wasn't New York or LA. There weren't a lot of options at all, and so I think both of our parents kind of put their foot down and said, you're going to have to eat. You can't just live on. I think we were just living on like French fries and salad, and it was not a sustainable diet. So she and I did that together at that time. And then I did end up kind of finding a part-time job in my late teens as a babysitter for a woman who was doing some vegetarian cooking for a local university campus. She kind of had her own, she was like a food truck before food trucks really existed. And she would set up in the Fine Arts Hall of of Carnegie Mellon University and in Pittsburgh. And I would help her cook and also help take care of her kids. So it was kind of a combo job of babysitting. And so she was the first like real, like full-blooded vegetarian that I knew, and taught me a lot about cooking and kind of jump-started me. And then that experience led me to get a job working in the local health food co-op, which had a tiny little vegetarian cafe and was kind of the only place to go in the city that was a fully vegetarian option. I mean, you could get, like I said, salads or, some sandwiches, hummus, it's things that were kind of by default vegetarian. But this was the only fully vegetarian place in the city. And that kind of really gave me a keen understanding of not just vegetarian and vegan food, but also really healthy diet choices. My fear was, that my ethics would lead to my demise if I wasn't able to find, how to cook and how to live. And so that woman who I cooked with turned me on to some well-known cookbooks like the Moosewood cookbook and the follow-ups to that, the Molly Katzen cookbooks from their little restaurant in Ithaca, New York, that kind of led the vegetarian movement of the 70s and early 80s. And then the job at the co-op kind of further cemented my ability to cook for myself and learn about food. And then there I was pretty fully supported. Not everybody there was vegetarian, but a lot of the people were. I kind of found the vegetarian community of Pittsburgh at the time.
Yeah, and so over the course of time, you've seen a fairly significant change in kind of veganism. Like, when would you say that would you say it's kind of steady incline, or would you say there was a real kind of a pivotal shift for you, or would you say it's a series of pivotal shifts?
What a great question. I think it's a series of them. I think there were like landmark moments. The first major one, I mean, kind of pre my time, were the people in the 60s and 70s, and John Mackey, who's the founder of Whole Foods Market and a longtime vegetarian, opened his store in late 70s or early 80s in Austin, which I think, people weren't really connecting the dots there, but that kind of set the course for a lot of these co-ops to open up in its wake, and they were all being led also by the macrobiotic movement. I mean, there's a whole backstory there to a lot of the foods that were kind of by default the vegetarian diet, coming from this macrobiotic movement that was actually really popular here in LA for a long time. So I think that was a pivotal moment. Just people kind of rejecting modern food and of the 50s and 60s that really like just processed meats and drinking like the Tang orange juice powdered mix here in the US instead of fresh oranges. There was just like a real divorce from whole foods that was kind of praised as a this is the modern world. It's living in the future. Your food should be powdered and coming in cans and weird non-recognizable delivery systems. And I think that was kind of set the stage. But I think in terms of when vegetarianism had a couple real, or veganism had a couple real big pivots was I'd say the launch of Silk soy milk by a company called White Wave out of Boulder, Colorado. And I remember seeing that. My grandparents lived in Denver and I was visiting there. And up until then, the only vegan milk options were the shelf-stable little Tetra packs of rice milk, and like Eden Soy and West Soy were the big brands here in the US. And Silk was the first must-be refrigerated soy milk, at least sold in mass. And I thought that was a real pivotal moment, and it started to get placement. People back then were dealing with a lot of, and still are, lactose intolerance. So supermarkets were more keen to bring on this product than they were the ones that didn't look like milk, that came in the little rectangle shelf-stable packages. And I think that took a really long time. I mean, that's 20 years ago that I think I first saw it, or even longer. Maybe 23 years ago. But that, of course, ushered in this whole wave of refrigerated non-dairy products that now are just dominating the category. So I think that was one really, really pivotal moment. And then, fast forward, a lot of stuff has kind of come in the wake of that, and there have been a lot of small victories. But I think the next biggest and maybe most memorable one in recent history is the launch of Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers, and their ability, those brands, to quickly get the products into some mainstream fast food restaurants and supermarkets. I mean, when also a Colorado story is when Beyond Meat first launched its burgers into retail, it did it in the cooler case outside of the butcher section of the store. So it was the first vegan brand to do that, to say, hey, we're a protein. We need to be where people are shopping for protein. And I think that just that awareness, whether you were a customer who bought that product or not, just the awareness that this conversation about, it being a vegan product and it belongs in a separate aisle, it just ended. It ended on that day. It was finally like, okay, here it is. Here is a protein made from plants. And Ethan Brown, the founder of Beyond Meat, does a really great job of explaining that it's, a vegan burger is just the same as a meat burger, which is, proteins and lipids and amino acids. And there's nothing that makes it unique to beef or pork or chicken or turkey. You can find these components anywhere in nature. So I think of those two moments as the really big pivotal ones in terms of what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I think you're sort of spot on. I love the way you've sort of succinctly tied that into a couple of like food items. I've got like a bit of a question or a thought process I'd love to explore with you, with all your kind of experience in the kind of vegan community about this, which is like I agree with you. I think a lot of those pivotal moments have come from almost a replacement or something that people who are perhaps omnivorous can identify with, whether it be a milk or a replacement beef burger or whatever it may be. But it's interesting, like most of the folks that I meet who are kind of like, perhaps as they go into the vegan community, yourself included, animal welfare, the environment, perhaps their health, these things kind of tend to be either their starting points, or at least they kind of like, those are their reasons for being vegan and staying vegan. I'm intrigued as to your thoughts on, the particular kind of pandemic we're in at the moment, and I suppose it'd be remiss to not talk about it, as we're all in the positions we're in. But with that particular situation going on, and the link to kind of omnivorous diets or zoonotic kind of illnesses, etc., do you think that it has the potential to kind of awaken something en masse in people in the same way that perhaps those other kind of pivotal moments you mentioned did, or do you think there's a danger we'll sort of just go back to normal once we've kind of come out the other side?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really interesting situation we find ourselves in now. I think, I have a lot of thoughts around it, and I mean, one of them is that conversation's not happening. I mean, there are way more serious things that we need to talk about in terms of the virus right now. I mean, people are dying at rapid numbers, and people are scared, and people are confused, and it doesn't feel like a earthquake or a fire or something that people can really wrap their heads around. I mean, they're being asked to like sit at home and eat, essentially. And I think some people don't have access to the foods that they would maybe like to have access to, whether they're vegan or they're not. They're just kind of making do with what they have. So it's a really like big and strange conversation, and there's a lot of layers to it. And we've talked a little bit, at Live Kindly, we've certainly talked about how meat played a role in this outbreak, the wild animal meat that was purchased at a market in Wuhan, China, is believed to be the culprit. I don't know that that's been 100% confirmed, but most media outlets are, saying the same thing, that's what experts are pointing to. So that conversation, I feel like, has not been covered as much as it should. Like, I'd love to see, Sanjay Gupta on CNN, and if he did do this, I missed it. Dive into that connection and the other health risks from eating animals and these other zoonotic diseases that can be contracted from animal products. I don't know if that's further down in the conversation around this virus, because right now people are just trying to survive. They're just trying to take care of their families. They're just trying to make sure their communities are safe. So, maybe once that kind of settles down, maybe once we flatten the curve, like everyone's talking about, then we're open to having those conversations in a more practical way. But I don't know if people are really able to have that conversation right now. Has kind of been my assessment. Is they're just trying, like I have a child who's just adjusting to being, have a virtual classroom. She's 6 years old and doesn't fully understand why she can't go hug her friends and be on the playground. And I think there are a lot of people, they're adjusting their work schedules. They're doing, just totally, their whole worlds are upended. So my guess is that I do think it's a conversation we need to have. And I know, there's lots of experts out there talking about it as well, but I don't think it's hit that level of conversation that we needed to have, where the major news outlets are pointing a finger at it. But I also think on a personal level, these experiences can be times of great, personal reflection and transformation. I think it's kind of there's that funny meme going around that everybody seems to be sharing. What is it? It's like Mother Nature sent us all to our room or something. The Earth just sent us to our rooms to think about what we've done. That kind of thing. Some of these success, or I don't know if success, but these stories about pollution decreasing and environmental benefits in areas where people are staying in and not traveling as much. I think those stories, again, like once kind of the immediate panic kind of comes to a little bit of a calm, those stories are going to get a lot more attention. And I think as people are sitting at home and kind of staring at their cabinets and their freezers and kind of making sense of, what's going to sustain them. Number one, we're joking about how quickly, all the vegan products are flying off the shelves, like beans and rice, in this time of crisis. People know that that's going to sustain them. So I think they're going to be taking that some personal inventory as well as supply inventory and kind of looking at it. And it's hard to say because we've not ever been in a situation like this before, and people aren't really sure what to do. And so I would hope, I have the greatest hope in humanity that they come out of this, or that we all come out of this feeling more connected and stronger. But, we know the flip side of that exists too, where people just come out more selfish and more self-entitled and more fearful than ever before. So hopefully it's the former and not that, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think you've answered that question, which is a very big one, quite excellently, because I definitely go back and forth, like, as I sort of consider myself a kind of activist in my own way, whether it be through the podcast or whatever, as you certainly are in your field of work as well, and you sort of go back and forth as to, when should this conversation happen? You sort of, like you said, you sort of feel like it needs to, but at the same time, right now, does that feel insensitive to, or is that? And then I sort of go back the other way and think, well, if we don't have that conversation sort of early, we sort of miss the moment almost. That so it's a really difficult question to answer. I thought you did very well with it.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's so difficult because people are slowly starting to freak out. I think a lot of people are still in that denial, and because there's nothing tangible. There's no building on fire across the street from them, and they're like, I'm young, I'm healthy. What's the point? Like, what are you talking about? I'm going to be fine. And, I think that level of dismissiveness toward our most vulnerable is kind of the bigger problem as well. I mean, when we talk about animal sentience, and like Joaquin Phoenix's Oscar speech brilliantly illustrated, the sanctity of an animal family, a mother and a baby being torn apart, and this total just like dismissal of the vulnerability of our fellow Earthlings is hopefully something that this pandemic can bring awareness to. But it's anybody's guess where we'll end up. I think hopefully on the right side of history.
Let's hope so. Absolutely. Well, let's sort of pivot away from that for a second. But it's a fascinating discussion. Probably one we're not going to be able to solve today. But we'll do our bit, I guess, over the course of time in having that discussion. And more power to you for your part. You've already played in that, which sort of leads me to this sort of story of Live Kindly. I'd love to hear a little bit about, kind of almost maybe for people who haven't heard of Live Kindly, which I imagine is very few people, or certainly in the vegan community, but a little bit of kind of where did it come from? What is it? I'd love to hear your kind of insight into it.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. We're just about 3 years old next month in April. And it was founded by a woman named Jody Manel, who had been vegan a few years and felt that there weren't really any resources for her in terms of well-written, informative content, videos, and social platforms that were really telling the story. And so she started it while having a day job and raised a little bit of money to bring on a few writers, and it kind of grew from there to being the largest leading vegan media publisher on the web. 100 million impressions monthly. We have about over 2 million followers collectively on our social media platforms, and just about as many page views every month coming to our site. And then the most exciting story is what happened 2 weeks ago. We announced that we were merging with one of our investors' projects, formerly called Foods United, which is now called the Live Kindly Company. So they took on our name, and that company not only absorbed Live Kindly, but it also absorbed a couple leading vegan meat companies. One is the Fry family out of South Africa. Believe they're 30 years old, and the other is the relatively young Like Meat out of Germany. And there'll be more brands coming under the umbrella soon as well. And the goal there is, we keep doing what we're doing and telling these incredible stories of vegan brands and businesses and entrepreneurs, and then these meat companies or vegan meat companies are working to bring more food to the masses. We've partnered with a few suppliers, and one in South Africa, and distributors, one in South Africa, one throughout the EU. And we've also partnered with Purist, which is the ingredient supplier for Beyond Meats, and they grow like the pea protein that you're seeing in a lot of these vegan products. So it's really exciting. We were all just in New York right before the virus pandemic hit, quarantine levels, and celebrating and getting to know our fellow team members and our company. It's being helmed by a former Unilever CEO, Case Kroitoff. I hope I said his name correctly. And so he's kind of leading the charge there with some just really incredible people, helping us move this mission forward. So yeah, a long way from 3 years ago when Jody was making videos on her laptop after work.
Yeah, wow, incredible story, isn't it? And yeah, just exploding with the sort of the scale and size of the kind of organization, if you like, and the parts of sort of the vegan community it will be able to touch, and hopefully the omnivorous community, if you like, and moving more of those folks towards veganism is the more power to you all, I say. So it'd be great to kind of just understand a little bit about how you personally became involved in Live Kindly, and I suppose the story of your sort of I guess falling into journalism and working towards Live Kindly, how you became involved in it.
Yeah. Well, so I mentioned earlier about how I went to work at a co-op in my teens as what I thought was the only vegetarian in Western Pennsylvania, and found out that was not the case. And at the time, I was studying journalism at the University of Pittsburgh, and just found myself really interested in this food movement, not just vegetarianism and veganism, but organic foods, natural products. It just felt like a real kind of homecoming after growing up eating, not the greatest food. And so I kind of just pivoted my focus into that world, and various jobs working as a buyer and store manager in the natural foods industry, and then ended up being recruited by a natural foods broker, which is an organization that represents a couple dozen different brands at a time, and acts as that liaison between the brands and the retailers and distributors, because it's difficult, if every brand has their own representative and they have 20,000 or 40,000 products on their shelves, the buyers would never get their work done if one person from each company came into the shop. So as brokers, we represent, just big swaths of those companies, and go in and work those deals and negotiate new placements. And it was a lot of fun. I got to travel and spend a lot of time up and down the East Coast. I managed a whole team there. And then from there, a good friend of mine was a founder of a vegan raw food company out in San Diego. And he asked me, he was only selling online, and he asked me to come help him get his products into retail. And so I built out, as national sales manager, I built out a whole platform, and took us from essentially 0 to 2 million in sales in less than 18 months. And it was a lot of fun. And then he sold that company, and I had the option to kind of end my time there, end my contract. And I just kind of went freelance, just took a break. It'd been like 4 years of nonstop travel across the country to every major health food store and distributors. And so I was like really ready for a break. I went to the North Shore of Oahu and watched the surfers, and made friends with all the street dogs in Hawaii. Had just a nice little break, and kind of came back. I was in New York at the time, and my studies of journalism had never really left me. I had actually been, during all of this, I'd been writing for a world music magazine that was based in New York, doing reviews and interviews. I even wrote some album liner notes, and really, always passionate about writing. A friend and I started a blog, and I was writing for a couple other platforms, but never like a full-time gig. And so then, after kind of not really sure what I was doing some freelance stuff, my boyfriend at the time had an opportunity to move to LA. And so I moved out here with him, and felt it was kind of the time I needed to find some work again. So I just started applying for writing jobs, and it was a good time about 10 years ago to really get into the online publications. A lot of people weren't really sure they could make money at it, but there were some out there that were doing really well and paying a pretty decent per story wage. So I kind of slowly got my feet wet with a few different sites, and then spent about 8 years running an organic food website, which I think at its peak had about 2 million page views a month. And so working with that team of writers and managing their content calendar, and working with some sales platforms within the company. And I loved it. I loved the company. Loved the platform, and the messaging and the content was always really fun. We would do a lot of, various different news stories, and a lot of lifestyle content, but the site wasn't fully vegan. And that was something that's really important to me, and it has been for more than half of my life. And I felt like it'd be so great to write for a fully vegan site. And I think I did a couple guest posts at Veg News, but they weren't hiring. And, so I just kind of kept the search going, looking for a fully vegan site. And all of a sudden I started seeing these videos from Live Kindly popping into my news feed pretty frequently on Facebook. And I was like, what is this? What are these videos? And I checked out their site, and they had a bunch of job postings. And long story short, I was just applying to be one of the writers, and Jody and I had a conversation, and she had a lot of editorial needs that she couldn't manage, and was really looking for someone to kind of step into that role. And I was really excited about the opportunity. It took a few months. She had to raise some more money to bring on more people, including myself. And so I was just doing like maybe an article or two a week to begin with. I think the site was 4 months old at that point. And then I think by January, I was able to come on full time. And that would be January 2017. 2018. So yeah, 2 years and a couple months now.
Wow, what an incredible journey! you've done it all really in the sort of the vegan food and then the vegan journalism kind of world. It's quite an incredible story.
Thanks.
I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of where you guys at Live Kindly go about finding the stories that you do. They're so many and varied, and they come so thick and fast. It must be an incredible task to pull all of that information together. So what does that sort of start and end?
I think it's certainly a combination of things. I mean, we, as a news site, we get traditional press releases and pitches. I mean, I think my inbox every day has about 100 different pitches from, press publicists and press agents. But we do a lot of our own research. We have a lot of our own connections. We're constantly scouring the web, looking for stories. Or sometimes there's a news story that just has a really interesting angle that we realize the mainstream media hasn't really identified. So it takes some time. I think you have to kind of look at the story and really read between the lines sometimes to find an angle that's unique. Sometimes there isn't anything more unique than just what the headline is, like, KFC's launching vegan nuggets. I mean, there's nothing more to tell there. Except the bigger story about that. We're not going to pivot that away from its incredible headline. And then we work with almost a 24-hour news team, because we have a UK desk and a New York desk and an LA desk. So we're able to kind of be on the lookout for stories around the clock, which really helps us not miss anything. But there are things we miss, or there are things we pass up on that we don't think are a good fit. And then a couple of days later, we're like, oh, actually, maybe we should cover that. We'll see an interesting take on it that we didn't think of. But we do really try to think outside of the box. And we have just the most incredible team. Our editorial team is fantastic. And they come up with some really great story angles and ways to tell that story. And then same with our video team, does the same thing with scripts and what we're going to put out there on YouTube. And our social team too does a great job in terms of, whether it's finding a meme or a graphic or an interesting way to talk about a breaking news story that really gets more eyes on it. I think we have the best in the business out there.
Yeah, I couldn't really disagree with that. Yes, certainly from the content that I read on Live Kindly, I'd definitely say you have. I'd love to get your view on something, actually, because you touched upon the sort of the KFCs of the world and the kind of vegan offerings that they have, and it's an interesting sort of debate. And again, I go one way and the other on this debate, and I'd love to get your view on it. Is that I see many folks in the vegan community who feel quite negatively towards those brands' offerings. You know, for citing, I suppose, that the brand's reasons are disingenuous, and ultimately they're still funding, whether it be animal cruelty, animal slaughter, or environmental destruction, whatever it may be. And then on the flip side, and like I say, I do sort of oscillate between these two views myself, is that you then say, well, actually, if that's an entry point to somebody for who's never thought about veganism before, then kind of that targeting of the vegan pound, if you like, if it brings some more people into the vegan world and eventually they transition, then actually that's kind of what we need, is those mainstream brands making those moves, sort of with the power of our kind of financial clout, if you like, as individuals. We can sway the tide. So I'd love to get your view on it. And is it just me oscillating between those two, or how do you feel about it?
It's a great question. I hear it a lot. I see some people getting kind of frustrated that, like Dunkin' here in the U.S. recently launched the Beyond breakfast sausage, but it comes, I think, with egg and cheese, and people are like, well, why isn't it all just vegan right off the bat? And you have to look at the scale of some of these organizations and the ability to launch something that they can keep in stock. And when you're talking like a McDonald's or a Dunkin' or a KFC and the millions and millions of meals they serve like every day, that requires a lot of product, and they can't turn vegan overnight. They just don't have the supply chain. I mean, that's like problem number one. Where are they going to get it? Where are they going to get like 5 million vegan Big Macs tomorrow? I have no idea how many they sell in a day, but it's a lot. So there's, there are of course, a lot of people applauding it. I'm one of them. I'm applauding any step that's being taken to offer more vegan options to consumers, even if that means you have to modify a sandwich to be without egg or cheese. But if we're getting one person to try a vegan Impossible Whopper, or a breakfast sausage at Dunkin', or vegan chicken at KFC, and kind of break that stigma, kind of like the Game Changers aim to do with that film about athletic performance and the protein meat myth. I think then, like you're saying, that is really going to move the needle and allow that conversation to happen about, well, maybe today I'm going to diversify my milk. I mean, we're seeing that people are diversifying with their milk, and we think they're going to start doing that with their protein. They're seeing that there are these other options available. And just like oat milk is consumed by people who drink cow's milk, vegan burgers are going to be consumed by people who eat cow burgers. And these companies are I think they're taking big risks. I think it's a bigger risk for them than anybody. If they're dedicating some of their menu space to a vegan product and it doesn't sell, and they've tied up money in inventory that doesn't sell, it's financially that's a big risk for them. And but I think people are open-minded, and they're willing to try this stuff, and they look to these companies and they look to these brands to make these suggestions. Everybody assumes that McDonald's knows more about food than they do, even if McDonald's food isn't healthy. That's not the only reason people eat food. They eat it because they're hungry. They eat it because they like the flavors. They eat it because it reminds them of something. And I think people look to these brands to have that conversation with them and encourage them to try things because of these other factors. And so if we're not applauding that, I mean, you don't have to. You can say, no, not until everything everywhere is vegan will I be satisfied. And that's somebody, is entitled to say that if they want. But I think from where I've come from, where if I wanted to get something vegan at a fast food restaurant, I would have to ask for, lettuce and pickles, like hold the bun, hold the cheese, hold the burger. I think in the US, even McDonald's French fries aren't vegan. So seeing that there are these options picking up momentum and people are demanding more, it just takes time. And these companies, they'll change because they have to change, because their loyalty is to their stockholders and to the market. And if customers and are demanding this, they don't have a choice. They have to make these shifts for their stockholders and for their customers. And it's just not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen. And if we don't encourage it and we don't support it, then, what's the point? I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, I think it does. That's probably certainly where I tend to sort of land on the argument on a personal note. Particularly when it comes to any cafe or coffee shop that sells a bit of cake that's vegan. Unfortunately, it's very easy for me to choose that and then justify it with, well, I'm pushing the vegan agenda. So I'm with you on that. I think we kind of have a obligation, I suppose, in the vegan community to push those products, with our purchasing choices as well, and make them kind of financially viable, and hopefully it brings others into the community as well, which is ultimately our aim.
Yeah, I think here in LA, we're so spoiled. There's a vegan restaurant in any direction, 10 feet in any direction, and I tend to exclusively dine there pretty much. But I think I'm not doing myself a service, because I think there are a lot of restaurants in LA that are not fully vegan, but have some of the best vegan food around. And I think the further you get away from a city like LA, you're going to have to rely on these restaurants making an effort. It's not just going to be, oh, there's no vegan restaurants in my town, forget it, I'm not going vegan. There's a girl in Las Vegas, Diana Edelman, who does, it's called Vegan's Baby, and she's working with a lot of restaurants there to get vegan food on the menu, and she's frequently making it onto local news stations, talking about the success she's having, and especially in a city like Vegas, where it's built on visitors and not non-natives and non-locals. That's exactly the kind of thing you want to see. You want to see mainstream restaurants embracing all walks of life and all dietary preferences. And it's having huge success for these businesses. It's certainly making vegan or people seeking vegan food feel more welcome in that town. And so, who knows? Some restaurants, there's actually, isn't there a cafe in the UK that did that, where they pulled meat off the menu first? Is it the Fields Beneath, I think? And then they pulled non-vegan milk off the menu as their last step toward veganizing the whole cafe. And I believe it's, business is better than ever, if I'm not mistaken. So I think just like these big fast food chains are making shifts, or grocery stores are adding more vegan products, I think these mainstream restaurants, your nice fine dining restaurant or your local neighborhood cafe are certainly open to it. And, it's important to support them. I need to do a better job here in LA, because we pretty much only go to the vegan restaurants because they're so good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't quite got the same luxury, but yeah, we've even in the sort of the town that I live in here, there's in the UK, and it's sort of outside of London, where it is a bit more as you describe in LA, but there are one or two sort of vegan eating establishments, and one in particular that I can think of that offers an all vegan menu, which is fantastic. And it's a small business particularly, so I really want to support it as much as I possibly can. And then you do think as well, I definitely want to support others, particularly some of those smaller businesses who are really trying to offer and cater, because they'll do more. That the more we buy it. So yeah, with you on that one. I'd love to kind of hear a couple of your kind of standout stories, the ones that you might have worked on over the years that were really kind of really exciting to get stuck into at the time. And was there any that really stand out for you?
I think, one of the most fun moments of recent months was we were working on a story about Joaquin Phoenix. I think he was working on a film about pig sentience. I think it's coming out of Germany. I'm not sure. So it was like an urgent story we were working on, and then we had to stop that because there was another urgent Joaquin Phoenix story breaking, which is that he rescued these cows from a slaughterhouse here in Los Angeles. And, at one point, I think there were like 7 articles with his picture on our homepage because he had just been in the news so much. And I wrote the one about, I think I wrote the cow rescue, and then I wrote the one on his Oscars win that night. I was watching the Oscars and writing that one up. And I think when you see somebody in that position that is able to just kind of own the spotlight and put it to a narrative that is also, I think, really speaks to this coronavirus outbreak a little bit ahead of the panic and when he was talking about some of those walls needing to come down about how we treat each other, whether we're, human or not. And just like such a great time to be able to tell that story and how I just think, how is my daughter going to look back on that period in time when she's older and she's being raised vegan. And here's this person that was just like so committed to the cause that one story is bumping out another story. Was bumping out another story in terms of priority and relevance, and they're also relevant. And it just kind of shows the power of what a single person can do. And we're certainly not all Oscar winners out there, but we make a difference in everyone's lives that we interact with. And so I find that just a really good reminder that, everything we do matters and we need to pay attention to it. So that was just really fun when he kind of bumped out his own story. Another fun, exciting story. I think the KFC just kind of blows my mind. I don't know why, but I felt like they would probably be the last to make this shift. And I know McDonald's has done some work in Europe and in UK. They just launched some like vegan Happy Meals, but they're pretty lagging here in the US. And when you have vegan Whoppers and vegan KFC, it seems like they should be able to do even some test run markets there. But seeing KFC do it though, when because, you look at these other fast food giants and they have kind of diverse menus. There's a lot of things on there as like main meal items. And with KFC, it was kind of like chicken and then side dishes. And there was no like in between stuff. There were no salads unless they were sides, etc. And so seeing them make a hard pivot toward a plant-based offering with such like pride and the way they kind of redecorated an entire restaurant in Atlanta and like just the amount of energy they put into promoting that was just absolutely mind-blowing and something I never thought that I would see in my lifetime. So that was a really fun one. Not sure what else. I think we did a nice one that I was surprised to see do so well. Celebrities before and after going vegan. And, it felt a little bit like tabloidy and but it's actually something people are really interested in because I think the power of a shift, of whether it's a physical shift, like someone like Kevin Smith losing over 50 pounds, or it's just like a total psychological or spiritual shift. Like I think Mina Suvari had that when she kind of went vegan and realized her closet was full of all of these animal products and had this just kind of landmark moment where she just cleaned everything out and got rid of everything and redid her wardrobe in an ethical way. I think that people can relate to those moments. I mean, maybe they've not had it about their diet or their wardrobe, but they've had it elsewhere in their life. And so I was really impressed to see how well that one did for us in terms of our viewer response.
I love those. What great examples.
Thank you.
Some awesome stories to have covered over the years, and the Joaquin Phoenix one, I think particularly, like there was there's a pocket of time there where, like, you're absolutely right. Every social media outlet I opened, every news channel I looked at, he was doing something else to raise the profile of sort of veganism and animal activism, animal rights, and it is just incredible to see, because you just think somebody in that sort of position, Hollywood's quite an established establishment, if you like, and to sort of say the things that he said in that period of time, we can all say, well, he's a multimillionaire and he's an actor and this and that, but he's still part of an establishment that could have quite easily rejected him, and he chose to his beliefs over the fear of that, which is just incredible. So
Yeah, it can't, I mean, I don't think it can be underscored enough. And I know it's, it's just kind of every vegan's feed for a couple weeks was Joaquin Phoenix. And it's kind of funny, it's nice to be able to make light of it and have a laugh at it. But it's absolutely like unbelievable. And I think people will look back on it in just with a whole different level of respect. And like, I mean, we talked earlier about when were these big vegan moments of, that the industry kind of shifted. And I mean, that's probably a new one right there. I mean, I think we covered the actress Lena Dunham said that after she watched that speech, she's like giving up dairy. And Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One world champion, praised that, he's also a vegan, but he praised that speech. I mean, you have, we covered a couple of stories, like, was it a dairy or a cattle farmer somewhere, like agreed with Joaquin Phoenix on some level about that speech. And I think it's, it's kind of become this huge talking point right now, but it's for good reason. I mean, it's really had an impact, and I think its impact is we're just beginning to feel the effects of that. And if we all survive this virus, who knows? Who knows what will happen as a result of that?
Let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So just sort of finally, really, it'd be great to kind of hear your kind of view on where kind of next for Live Kindly. What's the kind of ultimate aim, ambition, the sort of vision for the outlet?
Just, I think more. I mean, our vision is to grow bigger, faster, and better. And we know that people want these stories. We know that there are lots of stories to tell, and we're just getting started. I mean, we're still a small startup of, I think our total team is at about a dozen right now. So if we're able to add more, we're just going to do more content, more videos, more articles. We may do some events down the road. There's just more to tell and more to talk about. And I think people are ready for it, and we're ready to tell those stories.
Absolutely, and I think we're all ready to receive them. And I think they do a great job in kind of informing those who perhaps aren't in the sort of vegan bubble, if you like. And the more outlets that do that, the better, I say. So thank you for all you do in that space.
Oh, thank you.
And I suppose that brings us to the end of our time together. So thank you so much, Jill, for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it, especially given all that's going on, and having to turn into a homeschooler and all the other things that we're kind of currently learning and going through. So all the best, and stay safe, and thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care.